What's up guys, Raziel here, and today I'm going to bring a video to you that may be a little premature, but I want to talk about Final Fantasy XIV 5.0, the next expansion that is yet to be announced, what we know for pretty much for sure at this point what's going to be there, and what I kind of hope Square Enix does with a few other things. So let's talk about it.
I am Raziel.
Well, as of today, the 5th of June, 2018, it is patch 4.31, which added the newest Ultimate Raid content, and then in another 2 weeks we should see 4.35, which will bring out the newest Deep Dungeon, aka Heaven on High. Then 2 weeks after that, we should see 4.36, which will have the next Relic Weapon quest, as well as a whole new Eureka Zone to explore. My point about prefacing all this is Final Fantasy XIV is definitely not short on content at the moment, and we still don't know if this expansion is going to end up going to patch 4.5 or 4.6 as its final patch. All that aside, we already know quite a bit about what the next expansion will entail just from what the game itself is showing us and telling us in the main story quest and other hints and things like that. Keep in mind, from this point on, there will be a few spoilers if you haven't completed the 4.3 main scenario questline, so, you know, get the fuck out of the video now if you don't want to be spoiled. But you've been warned. Moving on. Now, I know that patch 5.0 is a long way out, and that we won't even get a concrete expansion name and real details about it until November of this year at the Final Fantasy XIV Fan Fest in Las Vegas. But I've been around long enough to see the signs of what's coming, and what I really hope comes, because Square desperately needs to do something about some things in this game. So here is what I'm almost certain will be in Final Fantasy 5.0, the next expansion, whatever the name of it may be, and what I hope to fucking green Jesus is something that does happen. Some things that should be in this expansion, and a lot of them are tied to quality of life. So without further ado, here's what I think is almost certain. So I think I can say with almost absolute certainty that Garlemald will be the location. You know, the Guardian Empire's home island or continent, if you will be the primary location of the next expansion. But, and we've gotten a lot of information about this. If you did 4.3, you know that that's where Alphinaud is currently headed and where he's going. And he runs into some trouble on the way. The Empire is kind of betraying some of its own agents, a couple of the agents that do want to see peace between, you know, Eorzea and Garlemald, but we also know at this point that it's very likely that the spirit that's within Xenos, the main bad guy of Stormblood, is an Ascian. And we haven't, you know, dealt with the Ascians too much since A Realm Reborn. They weren't a huge focus in Heavensward. But, you know, they did pop in and out during the Nidhogg questline and all that shit. So we know the Emperor's son, you know, the main antagonist so far in Stormblood, died. Practically cut his own head off, but somehow he's still alive in this the latest patch that we see. And it's kind of clear that it's not actually him, that it is an Ascian possessing his body. And the Ascians, of course, have been the main overarching villains of Final Fantasy XIV since 2.0's launch. And they're obsessed with trying to resurrect their god. They have summoning primals all over the place. They set up the stage for primals to exist in the first place. So it's pretty clear we're going to Garlemald, and that is going to be the focus of the next expansion, is dealing directly with the Empire and the Ascians again in the next expansion. Now, some other stuff we have some pretty good information about, some pretty good guesses, I should say, are what jobs are going to be in the game. As far as in the previous Final Fantasy expansion, we got in Heavensward, we got 3 jobs. We got Dark Knight, Astrologian, and we got Machinist. However, in Stormblood we got 2, Red Mage and Samurai, and I don't think that we're ever going to see 3 jobs come in an expansion again. I think it was too much work. It was too much to balance around. So I think 2 jobs is going to be the normal thing from here on out as far as expansions go and adding new jobs. I think the most likely jobs we will see, and again, I don't know for certain, but I think the most likely jobs we will see is the Blue Mage, which if in the game I think it would be introduced as a tank, a Geomancer, which if in the game I think would be introduced as a DPS, a Dancer, which if introduced would be a healer, Arithmetician, which I think could be any of the three. It could be, you could make the argument, but I think it's the least likely to be a tank and more likely to be a DPS or a healer if Arithmetician is in the game. And then, of course, my other guess would be Time Mage, which I think if introduced would be a healer or a support job. So these are the 5 jobs that I think are most likely going to be in patch 5.0, the most likely jobs we'll keep in line with the theme of what we have going forward and in line with what we've seen in the storyline content in 4.3, 4.31, etc. Dark Knight, we know there's going to be some major class changes. It is still possible, but unlikely that Dark will get a complete revamp in 4.5 or 4.6. I think it's more likely to be done in 5.0. And we do know that Square Enix is very aware that Dark Knight needs to be built again from the ground up, needs complete refresh, and I agree. The recent buffs that Dark Knight got definitely helped and closed the gap between the other 2 tanks quite a bit, but I think Square knows it's time to go back to the drawing board for Dark Knight. I also wouldn't be surprised to see Samurai get a complete rebuild, as I don't think the experiment of the super ultra absolutely zero utility greedy DPS works. Like how the Samurai, I love the way the Samurai plays, but I don't think if it only being DPS is working. I think Square knows it isn't working because they have to continually band-aid patch Samurai almost every balance pass. It's just not, it just doesn't work, mainly because, yeah, if you're a top tier player and you play a Samurai, sure, you're going to do just fine and excel, but an average player on a Samurai is never going to outperform an average player on another class that brings utility. And I think that it just makes the class not super accessible to everyone. So I think that the Samurai is not going to get a complete overhaul, but I think it's going to, at the very least, be getting quite a few utility abilities added to its class in 5.0. I'm not super familiar with every class in the game, but as is normal with any expansion, I think every class is going to get a pass and some adjustments, some new abilities, some pruning of other abilities, things like that is pretty normal. So expect that as well. Now, what I think Final Fantasy is in desperate need of. Things that I think need to be changed, and again, this isn't based off any evidence that I think Square is going to address these things, but I think it would be absolutely in their best interest to address these things. The first thing I want to talk about that I think the next expansion absolutely needs to address is the absolute lack of tools in Final Fantasy XIV for free company recruitment. It's a pretty standard thing. There needs to be a way for people who don't have an FC or are looking to find a new FC to browse currently recruiting FCs without going to a subreddit, Reddit forum, or going on the official Final Fantasy forums, which are heavily monitored. I think it would be much, much better if there was an in-game tool to search out an FC that suits your playstyle and what you're looking for, and for, FC leaders to find new members for their static groups and things like that. Something needs to be built into the game and kind of address this issue, because right now there's really, other than spamming in the actual game, and you're very limited on how big your macro can be anyway, there's really no way to recruit in-game or by just having your character AFK while you have Party Finder open, advertising your static or your FC. There needs to be tools in the game to make it so people can find a free company. The next thing is, I think, and this is one I wouldn't be surprised if it got changed a little bit, I think Final Fantasy and Square need to shake up how endgame gearing works. I think right now their system is a little antiquated and outdated. I don't think they need to go the fucking route that, World of Warcraft went when they just started. Their solution to that was just making rare gear no longer rare and adding RNG to fucking everything in its mother. I don't think that's the right route. But I do think that stuff needs to be put in the game so that the content lulls that do end up in this game, as they do, you know, rear their ugly fucking faces in most MMORPGs at some point or another, and it needs to keep the game a little more fresh so the content lulls aren't as long. Better ways to gear, not necessarily better content to gear through. I just think the whole model needs to be shook up a little bit. What that means, I don't know. I don't have necessarily this is the solution they should have. But I think some changes need to come to endgame in terms of how they gear. The tome system is a little outdated. And I think it's something that very likely we might see. The next thing I think we absolutely need is the revitalization of open world content. Fates need to be rethought. No one really does Fates anymore. A good example of how I think they could shake it up is how the public events work in a game like Guild Wars 2, which are very interactive and very fun to do and provide really good rewards other than just experience. I think if Fates were a little more interactive now and they offered more things than just experience and tomes, you know, or coins, an actual loot could drop, rare loot, not root, am I drunk? No, loot that maybe is really good for glamour, loot that is really good for item level wise. I think that, you know, really cool mounts, things like that should drop from Fates, and certain Fates, and you have to spawn certain rarer Fates to get certain things. I think would be, much the way Guild Wars 2 does it, would be very, very good for the old world content of the game. And finally, the biggest thing, and I think this is right up there with FC tools, in fact probably higher, is Square needs to make the main story quest for new players more approachable, less grindy. My suggestion would be completely cut out. If you choose to skip it, give the option to skip all the patch content, main story quest stuff after the end of a certain game. For example, I think that, you know, in 2.0, you should have to do the story all the way up to when you kill Ultima Weapon. All the stuff, all the main story quest stuff that was added in the patches after A Realm Reborn, but before the release of Heaven's Word, should be skippable, to where you can choose to watch like a 10-15 minute cutscene instead that will show you, you know, like a cutscene of what that story happened. And again, this is just a suggestion. What happened if you choose to skip that. You can play through it if you want, but if you choose to skip it, it'll just show you a cutscene, and you don't have to do all those patches content, you know, after. Same with Heaven's Word. All the patches that came out and added more story content after you beat Nidhogg, before Stormblood came out, should be skippable. Be able to watch a cutscene that summarizes it for you, and then you can move on and actually get in. Now, I think all the content patches then in the current expansion shouldn't be skippable, but the old stuff, it's too big of a barrier, it's too overwhelming for new players, and to be honest, it's what prevents a lot of players from reaching endgame and seeing how fucking fantastic of a game Final Fantasy XIV really is. So I think that would really, really help. Also, I think they could go through all of the expansions and A Realm Reborn, and all those quests where there's no combat, there's no instance, you just go back and forth talking to 20 people, can be cut down to just you talk to one guy and you're finished. It can be, you know, get the information out that the person absolutely needs for the story and cut out all the bullshit. Maybe even have that as an option, you know, in the settings. I don't know. I know that would be a lot of work and require a lot of time of going back to old content by the development team, but something, and this is just my suggestion, but something has to be done about the barrier that is the old content that prevents people from really getting into a game that otherwise would get into it. You know, I think that people might argue, well, there's the fucking, you know, you can pay to skip the story. Yeah, but that's useless to someone who's a new player, because then they're going to skip the story, they're going to skip the entire experience at level 60, have no context to who any of the characters are in the game, have no context of the story, not give a shit about it because they aren't invested or immersed in it. So I think that's not a feasible option, to skip the story as a brand new player. Other things need to be done, which I also think kind of an in-game character lore grimoire or book should be added. So if you do choose to watch the cutscenes and skip, you can go through and only the main, antagonists and protagonists that are essential to knowing how the story works are listed there, and you can read biographies of what they did, much the way they did the exact same thing in Final Fantasy Tactics, where as the story went on, you could go through and it would say if a character was deceased or unknown or alive, what they've done in the story up to this point. You could read it if you wanted to. Something like that would be fantastic in the game. But anyway, guys, those are the things that I think we are most likely to see, the things I really hope we see. And, stay tuned. More content's coming soon. If you like the video, you're brand new to my channel, please, please, please hit subscribe and the alert button so you know when my content goes live. Catch me on my Twitch streams. Right now, the current schedule is every Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. More will be added as the times at my regular job shift. But I really appreciate all the support I've been getting on Twitch, guys. All the support I've been getting here on my channel. For all the trolls out there, I love watching your salty messages and telling you to go fuck yourself. So please continue to do so. And guys, as always, this has been Raziel, and keep it real.